Welcome back to Every Disney Movie Ever. My name is Jess, and I'm watching Every Disney Movie Ever. This is the Rewatch series! Today, I'm going to be talking about
Dumbo.
Dumbo was a 1941 animated theatrical release, and everyone I'm about to list I've covered in previous videos, so I'm just going to put their links in the description. It is directed by Ben Sharpstein, Norman Ferguson, Wilfred Jackson, Bill Roberts, Jack Kinney, and Samuel Armstrong. Animation directors include Art Babbitt, Ward Kimball, John Lounsbury, Fred Moore, Wolfgang Reitherman, Bill Teitla, and Frank Thomas. The music is by Frank Churchill and Oliver Wallace. Film was written by Otto Englander, Joe Grant, and Dick Humer. Dumbo is based off a book called Dumbo the Flying Elephant by Helen Aberson and Harold Pearl, illustrated by Helen Durney. It was a limited time roll-a-book series. It is pretty much lost to time. Not really anyone has a copy, not really anyone knows exactly how the story went because it was so short. It was probably like 5 to 10 lines in a book that you could crank. It was more of a toy than a book, and it had illustrations. It wasn't a long story. I don't know the original plot, so I can't compare the two, but I do know the major change that happened was Dumbo's ally was originally a red robin, and Disney changed it to a mouse for the humor of like elephants are afraid of mice. According to what I could find, Disney stays faithful to the book because the book was so short. They just included everything that was in the book and then added what they wanted, including the pink elephant sequence. Dumbo is a silent character, so no one voices him, so the film stars Edward Brophy, who voices Timothy Mouse, and he's best known for The Whole Town's Talking, The Falcon Films, and Freaks. The story was brought to Walt's attention in 1939. He purchased the rights. He thought it was interesting, thought it was good. It was originally supposed to be a short, but they decided they wanted to do it justice. Joe and Dick wrote the script in a chapter format more than a script format, and they would leave a chapter on Walt's desk every day, and eventually Walt got so hooked he went to Joe and Dick and was like, okay, what happens? Let's talk about this. This is really interesting. The film ended up being a cheap and quick film for them because they wanted to make money. So as we've discussed, Pinocchio and Fantasia were such big undertakings for the Disney studio, and both didn't make any money back. They did poorly at the box office, mostly due to the war in Europe. So they needed a cheap film that could make the studio a profit. So Walt looked at Ben Sharpstein and said, I want you to make it fast and inexpensive. And that's what they did. Dumbo was made for less than $1 million, and it made over $1 million in the box office. Because Walt and the studio wanted the film done simply and inexpensively, they had to use simplified animation, which include watercolor painting in the background and kind of a more cartoony look for the whole film. The animals are very cartoony compared to Fantasia and Pinocchio. It's just a much more cartoon feeling film, but is appropriate because of the circus. They did get to use animal footage as live action references though, which is very cool. During production, Herbert Sorrell of the Screen Cartoonists Guild demanded Disney sign with his union instead of IATSE. These are filmmakers' unions. IATSE is like a general filmmaker union. You have the Directors Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, the Producers Guild, and then you have IATSE, which is pretty much like any kind of filmmaker that has done enough time to be in the union on unionized sets. It's complicated, but there are a lot of different unions, and the Screen Cartoonist Guild was one, and he demanded that Disney signed with him instead of IATSE, and Disney declined. And then in May of 1941, when Dumbo's rough animation sequences were done, the Disney staff went on strike for 5 weeks, and it was really dramatic, and Disney gave a speech that was pretty much like telling people to suck it up. If they wanted the privileges higher up people had, they should work as hard as possible to get higher up to get those privileges and not complain. So it didn't go over well, and then after the 5 weeks, the strike ended, and according to sources, that ended the family feeling at Disney Studios. It became much more like a business, and Walt distanced himself from people. It's really disappointing. It's sad that it ended the family feeling at the studio, but it makes sense. I'm not gonna go any more into depth about the strike. There's some more information. I will link in the description just the general information about it if you want to read more about the Disney strike of 1941. Dumbo was released in October of 1941, which is crazy because that means it took less than a year to make because they started animating at the beginning of 1941, and then they had a 5-week strike. So it took little time to make the movie. They did do it quite fast. They did it for $950,000, and when it was released, it made $1.6 million. It turned a profit. It is the only Disney film before 1943 to do that, along with Snow White. There's only two before 1943 that turned a profit, and it's Dumbo and Snow White. The film is very highly received. It has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was supposed to be on the cover of Time magazine, but then Pearl Harbor happened. As I'm sure you saw in the thumbnail, I had access to the DVD, which means I had access to special features, which means we're going to talk about them. There were 2 deleted scenes, both having to do with Timothy Mouse. The first being Timothy Mouse discussing why elephants are afraid of mice. He tells this whole backstory about in prehistoric times, mice were as big as dinosaurs and would eat mammoths, elephants. And elephants never forget. They have amazing memories. So that's why elephants are afraid of mice, even though they're a million times bigger than mice now at this point. That was very cute. The second scene that was deleted is more of like an extension when Timothy is comforting Dumbo after his mom has been gone and all the ladies were being really mean to Dumbo. Just before they do the whole drinking thing for the Pink Elephant Sub Parade sequence, there was originally a song there that Timothy Mouse sang about him and his father and how his father, told him, "Are you a man? Are you a mouse? Buck up, you'll get through it, you're awesome," all that kind of stuff. It was a very cute song and sequence. There's a making of Dumbo that's about 30 minutes. I've discussed most of it with you already, but they mainly discuss the animators, the strike, the music, and how they made the film fast and inexpensively so they can make a profit. And they also discuss how after the strike and after this film was finished, a lot of the original animators left, like Art Babbitt and Bill Tytla, and it was detrimental and sad, and everyone was really disappointed, but that is what leads to Disney's Nine Old Men. A bunch of those animators that were taught by the original awesome animators like Art Babbitt and Bill Tytla are who become Disney's Nine Old Men. So that's really interesting. Otherwise, it's really just 30 minutes kind of talking about Dumbo and how it's more cartoony. There's a commentary in which you get to hear old clips of these people talking. So you hear Ward Kimball and you hear Joe and Dick Humor, and it's fun little clips, but it's actually commentated by Disney experts and a couple of the current Disney animators at the time when they made that. There's also a Walt Disney television introduction. Disney showed the movie on TV at some point, and he himself did an intro for the movie, so that's on the DVD, so you can watch Walt introduce the movie. And he says it's his favorite Disney film. I don't know if I believe that. I feel like he says that about a lot of Disney movies. The film won an Oscar for Best Original Score. It was selected for preservation in 2017. It had a show in the 80s in which Dumbo actually spoke. It had 3 different books, and it had a video game all made after it. It's all the merchandise and everything, or extensions. It had a planned sequel in 2001 directed by Robert C. Ramirez, and it was supposed to follow Dumbo and his friends after they get left behind by their circus on accident as they travel through a big city, but John Lasseter canceled it, and the live-action adaptation for this movie comes out March 29th, so mark your calendars. Directed by Tim Burton. It's got Michael Keaton, Colin Farrell, a lot of big names in it. Looks interesting. I will reserve my judgment. There is some controversy regarding this film about racial stereotyping and the crows. The whole argument is that the crow characters are racial stereotypes of African American culture, which technically is true, but all of the crows except one are voiced by African Americans. They had brought in really famous African American musicians and dancers to film for live action reference, so it is supposed to be an African American jazz band type group of characters, but it's met with a lot of controversy for racial stereotyping. There also is a lot of African American support for the characters because they're positive characters. They're not meant to be a joke. They help Dumbo. They're friendly. They're fun. They are positive characters. It's not like a joke or a visual representation of something that's really bad. Like in Fantasia, how they had colored centaurs basically catering to and working for the Caucasian centaurs. This was much more meant to be like a jazz band community, and they all of the characters are voiced by African Americans except one, so that is a mistake. If they were trying to represent an African American jazz band, they should have used all African Americans to voice them. But then they used African American jazz bands as reference, they used African American dancers as reference, and the characters are positive. So I see why there's fight back about it being racial stereotyping. It is racial stereotyping. I don't want that to be confused. That was a racial stereotype. It is a racial stereotype. That group, is played up. But Whoopi Goldberg has said she wants the Crows merchandised because she loves them and thinks they sing the best song in Dumbo and thinks it's the only song people ever remember from Dumbo. So there is, this is probably one of the most, fought controversies where, the one in Fantasia and the one in the shorts previously are not even an argument. It's inappropriate. It should have been removed. It should have never happened. For this one, there's a little bit of an argument from all sides, and I have no room to choose or speak or give my opinion on that. I'm just telling you there are both sides. I see both sides. I am not an African American person living today, so I cannot begin to even say or have an opinion on this. I just wanted to inform you that there is a controversy about it. In my original video, link in the description, I pretty much discussed how I felt the film was made more for adults than children. I feel a little bit differently now. And I also discussed how the pink elephant sequence is horrifying. I don't know if I feel that way anymore. And I discussed how he flies way later in the movie. It takes him forever to fly. And all of those things kind of shocked me. And how I normally just don't care about Dumbo. It's not one of my favorites. I have, as always, some new notes. I'm sensing a trend with this series where any movie I felt negatively towards or didn't super appreciate, I'm coming out with more appreciation, as is the case for Dumbo. I never really had an attachment to Dumbo. I'm not saying I have an attachment now, but I didn't care about Dumbo. I always forgot half of this movie. Still to this day. I thought Timothy Mouse was a mean person. He's amazing. Catty elephant ladies are terrible, and I knew that, but now as an adult, a 25-year-old lady, I'm like, oh, Dumbo is a child. Jumbo Jr., is a child, and he has some big ears, and you're just gonna straight up be like, wow, because your baby's weird. Dumbo, and I hate you. What is that? So terrible. I have a thing that is annoying because I know it's a cartoon, but there's a whole sequence where in the rain the elephants are helping put up the circus tent, and I'm just saying, elephants can flip over cars and uproot trees, so 7 elephants aren't gonna struggle putting up a circus tent. Even in the rain, not gonna struggle. I'm just saying, listen, I know it's a cartoon, whatever, but it just stuck out to me. Also, later in the movie, one elephant holds 10 elephants on her back. So you're telling me they struggled putting up a circus tent in the rain? Sorry. I'm so annoying. The pink elephant sequence is technically completely unnecessary. It does nothing for the plot. It's so unnecessary, but it was not horrifying to me this time. The only part that I did not like was the body made out of all elephant heads. I didn't like that, but I loved that the pink elephants come down and become clouds as the end of the sequence. I think that's really, really cool. The Baby Mine song in sequence where he can't see his mom, but they can touch trunks and stuff is so sad. I've never felt super emotional during that scene because I just didn't care about Dumbo, but it's sad. I didn't cry, but that is a downer. So sad. Believe it or not, that's all I have about Dumbo. I am sure this video is significantly shorter than the previous rewatch series. It was significantly shorter notes-wise, but there wasn't nearly as much information about this movie as the previous rewatches. It's also a much shorter film, and it was made a lot faster. It was made a lot more cheaper, inexpensively. So it's funny that correlates with how long I cover the video. It's only 2.5 pages compared to the 5 pages of Fantasia notes. So that is all I have for Dumbo. I think I'm gonna give it 7 elephants out of 10. It was really good. It was really cute. I have a much better appreciation for Dumbo now. I get why it's highly acclaimed. Still not my favorite, but I'm going to remember a lot more of it, and I have a better appreciation as per usual. Our original movie count is... If you want to keep up with what movie I'm watching when, follow me on Instagram or Twitter, and you'll find out what movie I'm watching when. Until next time, come subscribe, but I'm not sure if you are, so you do. And don't be the elephants, don't be the ringmaster, don't be the creepy clown people. There's a lot of people not to be in this movie. That was it, I think. Wow. Okay.